Hello and welcome all listeners to the inaugural edition of the Xavier Newswire Live. For the first time ever, you'll get to listen to the Newswire Multimedia crew give you the rundown on all of the news from Ledgewood Drive to Dana Avenue and beyond. I am your host, David Ludwig. In this episode, we're going to be talking about COVID-19's effect on campus, the Fenwick name change, and we're going to have some hot takes with our assistant multimedia editor, Will Pembroke. But first, for our main story, multimedia editor Hunter Ellis.
Thanks, David. The COVID-19 pandemic has made returning to college campuses difficult across the country. In the past week, students have seen several colleges reverse their decisions to return to campus after outbreaks of the virus on their campuses. The University of Notre Dame announced that they would convert to online instruction for at least 2 weeks when over 147 students tested positive for COVID-19. This was just after 1 week of in-person instruction. Similarly, after 1 week, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill abandoned plans for classes on campus after 177 students contracted the coronavirus. Another 349 students at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill were quarantined after possible exposure. In both cases, clusters of positive tests were linked to off-campus parties. Other colleges across the country have adjusted to plans to accommodate better for COVID-19 concerns. Michigan State University had already planned for courses to be offered almost exclusively online. But then, in a letter to students on Tuesday, August 18th, the university told undergraduate students to stay home. In part, the letter from the president of the university to students read, "Given the current status of the virus in our country, particularly what we are seeing at other institutions as they repopulate their campus communities, it has become evident to me that it is unlikely that we can prevent the widespread transmission of COVID-19 between students if they return to campus. Some universities, including Miami University of Ohio and Ohio University, had already anticipated not being able to complete a return to campus at the beginning of the semester. In July, Miami opted for a phased return. While classes would begin on August 17th, students would not return to campus until at least September 21st. Jeff Coleman, the chair of the COVID-19 task force, stated in May that being able to transition between in-person and remote classes has been a priority for planning, stating, quote, "We want to be able to be prepared for any scenario and be able to make the switch more seamlessly." Then, in June, Coleman said that a transition between the two learning formats is both possible and prepared. He said, "I am confident that we will be able to pivot to online learning whenever or however we need to." Xavier has acknowledged the struggles faced by other universities as well. President Father Michael Graham, in a video message sent to students on Friday, August 21st, pleaded with students. Please, 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 be safe and smart, and know that the choices that you make this weekend are going to impact us all. Don't have parties. Just don't. He continued later in the address, stating, "Parties and large gatherings have caused significant issues at other college campuses as well, and those campuses have often enough needed to go completely remote because of it." Then Father Graham continued his message with strong words to the student body, stating, "Those who choose to put our entire community at risk, well, they may not be welcome to remain a member of this community." Xavier University is tracking the spread of COVID-19 on campus through their Test, Treat, and Trace program. There is also a COVID-19 dashboard now available to all members of the Xavier community on the Xavier website. This page shows the number of cases of the coronavirus Xavier has on its campus.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back. Now we're going to have a discussion on the points that Hunter Ellis just brought up in his article. Please welcome with me the Newswire's op-ed editor, Charlie Gastalder.
Hello, David.
And the Newswire Live's multimedia assistant editor, Will Pembroke.
Hey, David.
How's it going, guys? Having a good day?
Yeah, pretty good.
That's wonderful.
Absolutely.
All right. Now, Charlie, you've actually written an article on the university and COVID-19 and how they relate. Could you run us through a few of the points you've made?
Yeah, so this week for the Newswire, I published an opinion piece focusing on a plea to students on what we can do to ensure that we stay on campus for as long as possible. Just a few recommendations included wearing a mask in public, making sure to cover your nose, which is something that I keep seeing. I mean, it has to be over your nose. Not going to parties, not sharing drinks, staying 6 feet apart. There's a number.
Right. That's perfectly understandable. All things that we want to keep our community safe. Will, do you have anything to add?
I was going to say we appreciate you shouting out the people that don't wear their mask over their nose, because we know there are plenty of them out there and we see them all the time and they need to be called out for it. So we appreciated that very much.
Yeah. Both of you, in your personal experience, what do you think the community here at Xavier could be doing better to keep everyone safe?
I think one thing I'm seeing, while everybody does seem to be wearing a mask, and I mean, there haven't been many people staying 6 feet apart, and I understand how difficult that is. You want to be close to your friends, but it is very important, especially since close contact is currently defined as being within 6 feet of somebody for at least 15 minutes. So it's okay if every once in a while you're within 6 feet, but it's best to really make an effort to stay apart.
Will, what do you think that some people in this community might be able to do better?
I would second what Charlie said, and I would start off on a positive and say that I've been pleasantly surprised by the number of people who are taking this seriously. You know, when I got here, I was not expecting to see as many people wearing their masks on outside, especially, and I've been really happy to see that. The one thing I would say is that, you know, when people are in class, I think it's easy to get lazy with it. I think it's easy to get tired and not want to wear it, but to continue to remember that, you know, every second that you have that off, you're putting other people's lives in danger. So, you know, just continuing to wear it throughout class, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's inconvenient, that's really the thing I would stress. But I would second what Charlie said as well.
Right. I know for myself personally, most people have been very good about wearing it in the dorms, although occasionally myself, I do see some people walk out of their rooms without it, but they immediately, you know, realize that they don't have their mask on and they rush back. So kudos to them. I think the biggest thing I've noticed is definitely the people wearing it below the nose, which, as we all know, is not effective because the nose is also connected to the respiratory system.
Yes.
Yeah. Charlie, Will, do you guys have anything else you'd like to add just about your beliefs of the university's policies concerning COVID? Anything at all you'd like to add?
I think they're doing about as good a job as they can. I think, you know, when it comes to parties, that's really the main thing we're looking at here. And I think that it's really hard for the university to contain those, especially considering they're not usually in plain sight. So you can't just drive a police car by and say, oh, look, there's someone having a party. You know, you never know. You could drive by a house and there could be 50 people packed in the basement and you just don't know it. At the end of the day, this is a situation where people are ultimately responsible for themselves and for their own community. But, you know, in terms of what the university is doing, I think they're doing about as good of a job as they can.
Yes, in a member of UNC Chapel Hill's student newspaper, the Daily Tar Heel, was actually published in the Washington Post today, and in her opinion piece, she discussed really aimed blame at the university itself and failing to listen to local health officials and sort of ignoring warnings. I don't feel that same sentiment towards the administration at Xavier. I think they've been doing a very good job, and at this point, it really is on us, the student body, to ensure that we're continuing to play our part and so that we can stay here for as long as possible.
I think that's a great point, both online and different social media platforms, and then people I know that go to other schools. I think that there's been a fair amount who are just generally concerned about what they're seeing, with how their schools are handling it, and are very worried for their safety. I don't really think that I've had that experience at all here, and I think that they're taking the precautions and listening to state and local officials a lot better than some other schools are, for sure.
Yeah. Now, I want to take a bit more of a serious tone in this discussion. based on your both experiences, what you've been observing in the community so far, do you think that at this rate Xavier is going to be facing the same fate as other campuses? Are we going to have to go home, in your opinion?
I mean, it is purely speculative. I really hope we don't. I'm thrilled to be here right now on campus. I am constantly afraid that at any moment we can get an email that will send us back. And that is a very real possibility, regardless of even if we do follow all requirements perfectly. Because there's just so much of this is outside of our control. I don't know. I really hope not, but we have to be prepared for that to happen regardless.
Right. You make a good point, Charlie. Will?
I could see this going either way. My answer is going to come a little bit later on in our hot take segment, so I'm not going to spoil that. But, I will say that I hear Charlie's points, and I think that they could be valid.
And kind of a follow-up question to that. Do you think that we should have gone back to campus, or should we have gone fully remote this semester?
I agreed with the decision to bring us back to campus. For a variety of reasons. One being that not every member of our community has a stable situation at home. Not everybody is secure in their housing. Some people are coming from abusive situations. And college is an opportunity to get away from that and to sort of escape. And especially with quarantine, where a number of people were stuck in difficult situations for months on end, I'm glad that we now have offered that respite.
Oh, that is a very interesting point, Charlie. I don't think a lot of us do consider that aspect in these conversations we have.
I would definitely agree. I would take it mostly from a mental health angle, similar to what Charlie was saying. I think even for kids that are in good situations, we're supposed to be in college. We've been home for 3 months longer than we bargained for. I think that everybody needed a change of scenery just for their own sanity. And I think that we at least had to try. That's the thing that I hear a lot, whether it's professional sports, whether it's, just opening up the economy in general. I think that, our livelihoods are not going to be normal for a while. And I think most of us have accepted that, but we at least have to try and do something to give people a little bit of sanity and feel a little bit of comfort in uncomfortable times.
Right. Now, while we were unable to get a number confirmed by XUPD, according to the department, XUPD has received calls from students reporting off-campus parties that don't abide by the community commitment. There has been at least one party busted on campus, according to students familiar with the situation. Do you have any thoughts on the matter?
Well, obvious thoughts aside, parties shouldn't be happening. There's better ways to go about spending your free time. Like I said in my piece, everything sucks right now. It all really sucks, and it's so tempting to go out there and just have fun, see all of your friends in one spot. But we really have to make the smart decision. Stay in your room. I believe for residence halls, the rule is the people that live in the room and 2 guests that are allowed to be present in the location at a time. Do that. Have people over. Play Mario Kart. Play Beerio Kart. Have fun, but please just don't do it in large crowds.
Right. And yes, the university policy is 2 guests along with the maximum living occupancy. In all dorms in Brockman Hall, it is maximum living occupancy plus 1. So that does actually mean that in Coleman, for example, if your roommate is gone, you can have 3 guests over. That's the maximum occupancy in the room. Will?
I think one other way to look at it too is I live in Fenwick Hall personally. We have 6 people in our room plus 2. That's 8 people. That's not a small gathering. You can still have, a friend or 2 over. You can still have fun, especially if one of your roommates is gone. You can up that number to 3 people. So I really think at the end of the day, there's still ways to see people. There's still ways to be social, and not everybody needs to be social. I get it. Like, we're not just going to sit in our dorm all day by ourselves, staring at the wall. Like, we understand that. But you don't need to have a party to do that necessarily. You can do that in a lot of alternative ways. And I think that the university, one of the things that I've been proud of and happy with is they provided us ways to be social. The other thing is go outside. Go outside. Your risk of getting COVID is so much less if you're outside. So, go to a park, go just out on the yard, just sit in lawn chairs 6 feet apart. I mean, there's plenty of ways to be social. And having a 50-person party, you just don't need to do that right now. And honestly, that is a minor inconvenience compared to the situations that others are faced with.
Right. I know personally, I definitely enjoy going on a lot of walks around campus. It's a great way to keep active. It's a nice way to see the sights. We have I may be a little biased, but Xavier, I believe, has a beautiful campus.
I don't think you're biased at all.
Yeah, if I may, to that point, I don't think any of us are saying that students should spend all of their time inside or only Zoom to see their friends. I love hosting people, and I have had people over. It's just to make sure that we keep it at an acceptable number.
Yeah, I know. I have a friend up in U Station that we get dinner and then we go back to the U Station. We hang out, we talk, we watch a movie, and it's a perfectly fine way to have fun with friends without going over an excessive amount. I think it was a wonderful idea personally for the Xavier to put the little white circles out on the north yard, so you actually have a way to keep your chairs separate.
I think that was awesome. I think it's really cool. I think the yard is a great place to utilize in order to socialize. I mean, and like Charlie said, I've had people over to my place too, and that's fine and everything. But like, if you're really, really trying not to contract, go outside. Like, being outside is the best option right now. Plus, it's good for you, right? It's good. It's really good for you. So.
Well, that will wrap us up for this wonderful discussion. Thank you both for your insights on this conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope you did too, listeners.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course.
Appreciate it, David.
So now we are moving to our feature on the print section. See you then. And welcome back, listeners, to our feature on the print section. Joining me today for this interview is our editor-in-chief of the Newswire, Heather Gast. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you, David. I'm glad to be here.
It's wonderful to have you on our inaugural episode here. Always great to have a conversation with you. You have amazing insights, and I'm curious to hear what you have to say on this topic we're discussing today, the renaming of Fenwick Hall.
Yes.
A very important topic in our Xavier community. So this has been going on and off for a couple of years now. And my question to start this off is why now? Why is now so important? Why is that the time to strike?
Yeah, so you're right. It's been about 4 years since we really started this conversation in October 2016 about Fenwick and about like that history of slavery when we were just learning it. And really we had intended to start this conversation of renaming the Stained Glass Initiative, intended for that to be last spring. But, like pretty much anything that was supposed to be last spring got postponed.
Pandemic happened, thing.
Yeah, exactly. But, it could have been really appealing to, when we have learned to immediately change something. But it has been intentionally been a brought out process. It's been so that to have these conversations and to not erase them, to really bring them out into the open and to really examine them as a community. And so when you think of it, especially if you're just coming onto campus now, you could think, oh, it's because of Black Lives Matter, or oh, it's because of this or that. But no, this process has been played out, and it's just the next step that Xavier's ready for.
Right. So that's kind of how the community got involved. But how did you specifically get involved with this story?
Yes, so I came to campus in 2017, and so this news had been around, and I was around Newswire people a lot, and Newswire people, it's like, our job to know the details of like every big thing on campus. And I had no idea, even like when I first came, the first meeting I came to Newswire, I came late, but it had been like the first article that they discussed had actually been on the Fenwick situation, and I had missed that. And it wasn't until like a month or so later that someone was like, Fenwick, and I was like, what? And really what something that we forget a little further back now is that what happened in the beginning of October with Bishop Edward Fenwick was very closely followed by a few bias incidents on campus, specifically around race. with things like incidences of blackface, and as well as a skeleton and a dashiki, which is an African traditional clothing hung by a noose, also wearing a sombrero in the window of Fenwick Hall.
Oh dear.
Next to a Trump 2020 sign a few weeks before the 2016 election. So something that like we can really forget, and I think I was really blessed to be like hearing from Newswire people, is they could help bring that context of just how much pain and how much like tension was really around the Xavier community at that time. And you know, when I started, the very first article I wrote on this was in 2018. It was for our April Fool's edition, and it was satire trying to poke at the fact that there really wasn't a lot of communication on this front. In my article, I was saying that they finally announced that it was actually going to be named Robert E. Lee Barracks, which, that should not be submitted. That should not be a name that's being considered. But it was, there were many like academic-oriented people who were very focused on this issue from a historical aspect, from like a racial aspect, but just the way it's worked out, there hasn't been like great communication to the whole student body, in my opinion, and how I've covered it and what I've seen in the past 3 years.
Right. Could you actually talk about that a little more, about that poor communication? How have students had an opportunity to be involved in this? How has the community of Xavier students been able to kind of add their input on this issue?
Oh, of course. From the very beginning, students were integral to this process. And I mean, most of them have graduated who were, actually the last Fenwick Fellow did graduate, Miles D. Meyer, last spring. But, and, I say like poor communication to like the student community at large, but when we think of whether students are involved or not, it's usually like a black and white issue. Like, do people know, and are they involved, or is it just off everyone's radar? But I want to be clear that, especially in the CDI, especially through the work of Dr. Kyra Shahid, there has been a number of students who have like really been fostered by the administration, and know a lot of information and are really entrenched within like anti-racist work in universities and in their own life. And so there is, and I mean, not out of Fenwick, actually out of the bias incidents that preceded, that were happening that same semester. That's when there started to be a course on anti-black racism and epistemic violence by Dr. Kyra Shahid, and that really started getting like that community of students really working against that, and that has really blossomed. But it's just been, and tons more students know now than they did years before. But there still definitely is an information gap, and just a lot of people who aren't even aware.
Right. I know some people aren't aware of the fact that Bishop Edward Fenwick did inherit and own slaves. Could you actually talk a little bit more about Xavier's kind of historical ties to slavery through people like Bishop Edward Fenwick?
Yeah, so Bishop Edward Fenwick wasn't the only person as part of Xavier's history to have a connection to slavery. Bishop Edward Fenwick, he was our first president, but he really didn't have that much impact on Xavier. He died in 1832. We were founded in 1831. He didn't really work on curriculum or anything. Another one of our presidents, actually our first Jesuit president, Father John Ellis, also owned slaves. He owned them before becoming a part of Xavier. He had actually been the president of St. Louis University in Missouri, and we have a hall named after him too. And we haven't really had any conversations yet about that. It's a small hall, and most people don't go to it. It's really only for psychology classes at this point. But and another aspect that like really needs to be like drawn to, and people need to keep in mind, is Father Ella actually did a lot of recruiting to get students to come to Xavier so that we could have enough tuition to survive, and who he was able to get to fund us, to allow us to last past the 1800s, last until today, were students from families that owned slaves in Louisiana, who then used their wealth to pay for tuition. So we still exist today because of the labor and the pains of enslaved people.
Right. how do you think that modern Xavier, the Xavier of now, how can they go about reconciling that past?
So, that's like a big question, a big reason why this has been a long process was people in Stained Glass Initiative, the working group, Father Graham, and just individual students being like, what can we do? Like, is looking back the answer? Is it erasing the past if we remove Fenwick's name? Is it this or that or other? And I have also studied anti-racism and like reconciliation for a bit. I'm not an expert at the level as some of these other people, such as Dr. Janice Walker and Dr. Kyra Shahid. But in all of the interviews I've done on the subject and things, it has been integral to look to the past and to address the past, but also address the present and, our recent histories as well. And, when I was talking to Dr. Kyra most recently, she mentioned that, some people are going to be like, oh, why are we renaming this? Why are we talking about slavery when, someone was just murdered last night? And there's someone who was just shot in the back 7 times last night by a police officer. But something that she brought up, to just keep in mind that you can't start from the top, you can't start from the offenses of today, because they go so much further back, and they go even further back than Bishop Edward Fenwick. Bishop Edward Fenwick inherited those slaves.
Right.
And, they had been in his family for many generations, and looking at that and looking at the attitudes that allowed Dominicans, which was the convent that the enslaved people owned by Fenwick supported, as well as Jesuits. What allows it that Jesuits were allowed to hold slaves? Interesting.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned you have studied that anti-racism and reconciliation.
Mm-hmm.
From your perspective, do you think that Xavier is moving in the right direction to create an inclusive campus where everyone can feel safe, secure, and welcome?
Well, Xavier has changed in the time I've been here alone, and having these conversations and some of the initiatives, such as including more faculty of color and different things, I would say are definitely better than they have before. But I also want to touch a second on why I studied anti-Black racism.
Yes, please.
Because it really does tie to this. And it ties to some of the other stories that I've written. So the anti-Black racism and epistemic violence class that's led by Dr. Kyra Shahid came up actually after the bias incidents that happened right after we learned about Bishop Edward Fenwick in 2016, which was just a hellish year.
Yes, I'd imagine.
Yes, and a lot of people who are here today can remember just the political tension, but there was also a profound amount of Black citizens who were killed by police that year as well.
Right.
Yeah. So that was in response to more of those incidences, but there have also been other reconciliatory movements along Xavier to work on that. And one of those examples is Django Praxis as part of Diasporic Soul, which is a study abroad experience for people who are descendants of people who were enslaved, that goes to Senegal, goes to East Africa, and it's a profound experience. Django Praxis was the first cohort of people, and it was the first time I got to write an article that wasn't satire in this too. And I did that story prior to taking the class, and sitting and hearing these people's stories, reading parts of this book that they published that had their reading, their responses to the class in it. And really just, listening to, Black students who went to Xavier, who were there then, who were there when other racial incidences happened when I've been at Xavier, such as, the N-word being scrawled against, residential, bulletin boards and different things like that. Those have kept happening. There have been bias incidences this year. There has been someone who has Zoom bombed classes and has just, repeated the N-word. We still have racial issues and we still have racial injustices on this very campus. Institutional racism is very real here.
Yes, absolutely.
And so, of course, we're moving, but it's not. We're like fighting against like the stream, in a way.
Right.
And it really, like, people are able to see, the renaming Fenwick really easily. Mm-hmm. But sometimes people really aren't able to see things like diasporic soul and those different elements that Xavier is working on or Xavier has proposed to work on. Mm-hmm.
Very, very interesting, Heather. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to touch on?
Yeah, one thing that I did say earlier about student engagement is that, there can be flaws with that but I really do want to stress that there are tremendous opportunities for people to be involved. Dr. Kyra, in like my last call with her, was like kind of like begging, like, if you have a passion for this at all, like, there are places where you can be plugged in. And I think even with like reaching out to like the entire university being a little tough, just that there are such opportunities. And in my experience as someone who has gone to symposiums and talks and seminars and Day of Read and different things, it is a transformative experience to be a part of it. And most of the time I write about it from a journalistic perspective and I like take my experience out of it, but following the story and being a part of these conversations has changed who I am as a person and has been one of the most fundamental life-changing things of being about Xavier. And it's something that I think should be like mandatory as a sort of conversation. And I think everyone needs to have it. But I mean, coming at it from a different angle, like, it is so enriching to your experience to understand this different part of the world that maybe you weren't challenged to think about back at your high school, or didn't have like those supports that you do have here, and they're so happy to involve you.
Right. Well, you've certainly given us all a lot to consider as we move forward in this community. I think there's just a lot we need to think on before we, get it right.
Yeah, and there are submissions open for the new names online right now on the Stained Glass Initiative website, and they will collect all the submissions, narrow down some, see which ones are like really similar. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of Father B submissions personally, and then present those on the Spirit Day at the beginning of September.
Wonderful. Well, I'm excited to see what comes of that.
Yes.
So thank you for joining us, Heather. Thank you for your wonderful insights into this topic.
Oh. And again, I mean, I think really coming from a journalistic perspective, there's stuff that I'm able to bring, but there are just so many people who have like lived through the institutional racism at Xavier and everything. I'm so happy that I was able to bring this voice to it, yeah. But there are so many out there, and I hope I could get them all on one day.
All right. Well, listeners, that will finish up this segment. We are going to take a quick break, and I will see you back after the intermission. Welcome back, listeners. We are just about to get into our next segment, but first, a quick announcement. Do you have any thoughts or feedback on the show? If you do, please drop your thoughts in the Mixler chat or send your thoughts to our managing multimedia editor at ellish2@xavier.edu. That's ELLISH2@xavier.edu. Now, we are very excited for this next segment. I am joined once again by our assistant multimedia editor, Will Pembroke.
Glad to be back.
And Will, we are about to do some hot takes.
Let's get right into it. All right.
Hit us with number one.
Number one. Now, I hinted at this a little bit earlier. Xavier's making it through the semester. We're not going home. I'm just letting everybody know that right now. We're a smaller school. We're not a school with 25, 30,000 kids. That puts us at an advantage. I've been really, like I said earlier in the segment with Charlie, I've been really happy with the way that everybody's been wearing masks both inside and out. I think that we have a little bit to clean up on the party front probably, but aside from that, I think we're doing a great job. And I'm just really confident. When David and I got together a couple weeks ago, I actually thought that we weren't going to make it, but the more days that I'm here, the more that I see, I think we're going to make it all the way through, and I think we're going to have a great semester.
You're right. I am very proud of how people have been doing so far, which actually leads me to say, listeners, if our audio sounds a little bit fuzzy, it's because we are wearing masks in the studio.
Yes, we are, and with filters.
Very courteous. All right. Now, Will, hit us with number two.
All right, this is the hottest of the three today.
Oh, okay.
Corrido is better than Chipotle, people. It's better. I just don't think there's any debate in my mind. There's way more ingredients to choose from, especially with grains. Like, Chipotle doesn't have quinoa, So it's just, I think that there's way more options to choose from. They have shakes. Chipotle doesn't have shakes. I love Corrido so much. I think it's great. I'm really glad that one of the things I was most excited about coming back to campus is the fact that I got to indulge in Corrido again, and I think that's wonderful. And it's really good for us to supplement the CAF, which I know is not operating at full capacity right now. Right. So I am fully on the Corrido bandwagon, and I won't hear otherwise.
I actually have to strongly agree with you here. I've had and this is good because I've actually had the same dish from both Corrido and Chipotle.
Okay.
And it was it was just pita bread and then steak and then just like cheese. And the one from Corrido blew Chipotle's out of the water, honestly. Like I gotta
hear that, everybody.
I gotta definitely agree with Will on this one. I'm gonna say Corrido all the way.
No doubt in my mind.
Hunter, can you give us a thumbs up or thumbs down for thumbs up for Corrido? No,
Ooh,
you're
double thumbs down from the
you're a Chipotle
editor.
guy.
Wow.
Dear listeners, you may have a new
Shaking
host
his
next
head
week.
Vigorously.
I think I may have just lost my job. All right. And then, Will, could you hit us with number three?
All right. So currently the pizza ATM is closed. It's broken.
Is
It's
it?
not working. Yeah, I went down there the other day. I was going to get a pizza, and there was nothing there. It's a good thing, people. It's a good thing. It means that you're not going to get fat. You're not going to be overweight. It means you're not going to be consuming pizza at 11:30 at night on a Wednesday when you're hungry and you're like, should I go get something to eat? Should I not get something to eat? The only thing that's open right now is the pizza ATM. No pizza ATM. It's good for the health of this university, and I'm happy for it. I am as big of a pizza ATM stand as you'll find out there. I think it's great, but it is a good thing. It helps eliminate late night snacking, and I think that overall it's just good for people on campus.
Interesting. No, but like
I stumped them.
The police. What? I don't know why I'm fumbling over my words so much. Maybe because I'm just so much in shock. But I feel like the pizza ATM is a valued piece of the Xavier community. It's our claim to fame.
I would not disagree, but I think that the health benefits here outweigh the value to the community, in my opinion.
No, you have a point. there. Honestly, my problem with the pizza ATM is that not enough options. Like I need some all meat pizzas in here. Throw in some sausage occasionally. I'm just not a fan of the pepperoni.
You're not a fan. Every time.
I
I'm
like
going
pepperoni, but just pepperoni on pizza, not as good to me as like a pepperoni and a sausage. Like, give me some options here, pizza ATM.
All right, fair enough. You heard the man. All right, that's it for our hot takes.
Yeah, that's all three.
Let us know if you have any feedback. We'd love to hear it. Drop it in the chat. Let us know what you guys think about the hot takes. I know they're very hot this week, and I'd love to hear what you guys have to say.
Quite spicy. Thank you, as always, Will. It's a wonder to hear your hot takes.
Always a pleasure, David.
All right. And listeners, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today in the inaugural episode of Newswire Live. We would like to thank you for tuning in to the show today, and we would also like to extend a special thanks to our multimedia editor, Hunter Ellis, our Newswire editor-in-chief, Heather. Thank you for being on that interview. Op-ed editor, Charlie Gestalder. Thank you for that wonderful conversation. Assistant multimedia editor, Will Pembroke. Thank you for your hot takes and that wonderful conversation. And our special guest, all the way from XUFM. Thank you, Kira. Thank you, Mike. I can't talk today, and it's an issue. Now, we would don't forget to send your thoughts to ellish2@xavier.edu. Once again, that is ELLISH2@xavier.edu. And we may read them during our next episode, which is Monday at 7 p.m. The music you've heard today's episode is called Inspiration by Rafael Krux. Until the next episode, this is your host, David Ludwig, wishing you a wonderful and good Monday night. Thank you all.